So hello, everyone. I'm Rosanna Cruz. I'm the founder of Racial Justice Reads. I'm a senior fellow at Race Forward. Just want to welcome y'all and thank y'all for joining us. Today, we're having some technical challenges, so the conversation is just going to flow how it flows. I want to say a big shout out and thank you to our honored guests, our authors, Junauda, Petrus-Nasah, and Gabby, Rivera. And just want to pass the mic basically to them while I attend to the folks who haven't been able to get into the Zoom and try and help them out. I also want to shout out our tech facilitator and team member, Tiff Joy, who is on the line trying to also support. We're really excited about this conversation. We're going to have some resources for y'all that you're going to take home with you. We have some booksellers that we're going to recommend to y'all, and just really thankful for y'all hanging with us while we try to get everybody in. And Junauda, I want to pass it to you first because Junauda and I met through our activity in Bona and becoming rocket ship mates on a path to this Afrofuturist, beautiful possibility in this rocket ship together. So Junauda, if you could take it away.
Yeah, I'm very happy to be here. I feel like there's so much that has changed in the last 10 days and my very, near and close geography. And but like Osana and Gabby, y'all are like such dear family to me. And actually I was scheduled to see both of you all in this season. I was supposed to see Gabby a couple of weeks ago. We was about to hug, we was about to smoke, we was about to eat, we was about to chill, we was about to dream, all of the mushy stuff. And then RC, you and I and the Spec Fit crew supposed to meet up in New Orleans, eat some beignets, talk some shit, smoke some shit. Right. So it's kind of like, COVID, and that changed that. And then now there's so much new shifts and so many ways that like, I'm just feeling all of the love from my family. Like y'all are my family, like, my POC non-Black family, being like, yeah, like, let's like fuck this shit up. So I feel like this is a aspect of fucking shit up. And I love Gabby. Gabby and I are snuggle buddies. And our books are snuggle buddies.
Yes.
I would say. So I think it's good to talk about whatever we want to talk about. Because I think it actually is going to be very relevant to this moment, because I think as was said before, like these moments are constant. There's always this upheaval and change, but right now there's a certain kind of leverage that feels like it's shifting things. So I'm excited to explore that with y'all today.
You're just the sweetest, Junauda, like you are the most loving, open person, like you just embraced me. You just embrace everyone that comes into your sphere. And so to me, it's like an honor to be in conversation with you, right? And like, our books are definitely like, our books are cousins first and foremost.
Yes, for sure, cousins.
Even like God siblings, you know what I mean?
Yes.
Yeah, and I think both of our books, yours, The Stars and the Blackness Between Them, and mine, Juliet Takes a Breath, but especially yours, project gorgeous futures for queer, Black, and brown and youth of color. Like, we are literally saying we're going to love you so much that we are solidifying this beautiful, abundant future for you, where you will fall in love, you are love, and like all of the universe and all of the astrological signs in it are yours, right? To be great, to be abundant. And that was one of the things that I loved so much about your book, Junauda, is that it is literally like love letters. You are writing love letters to Black queer youth, to all of us softy queer babes, and you are utilizing like the power of ancestral knowledge. And so I'm really curious, like, what was your vibe writing those like Scorpio love letters and the Gemini poems? Like, yeah, I want to know.
I think like with boop. And I was gonna gush about your book too, though. When I gush about your book, I'm gonna put some pins on some gushes I'm gonna gush on. Especially in thinking about this moment, I think your book really like deeply like luxuriates and like, you know, awkward queerness in a way that like, yeah, like we get to be super earnest and like, you know, pure about our sexuality as like BIPOC kids. And also navigate the ways that so much of white queer culture is kind of like a thing we have to navigate and reject in a lot of ways and become savvy to understand how whiteness in a lot of ways is kind of seen as the truth and the way. But just like how your character, Juliet, your spirit that you birthed, Juliet, really shows ways that like, because I feel like so many of the situations in the book I personally navigated as a Black queer, like questioning kid in Minneapolis, dealing with a lot of queer whiteness, you know, which anyway, like I feel like there's just so many conversations, but we'll talk more about your book too. But to answer your question, I think like I was really interested in looking at Black ancestralness within astrology. And thinking about like, I think astrology has always been beautiful to me with the archetypes and all the different like elements. And, you know, like for example, RC is a Leo, super sexy, very coiffed, you know what I'm saying? Very like generous and loving, you know what I mean? You're a Virgo, like super smell good, shits together, you know what I mean? Like very much like, you know, funny, perfection is like easy to you, you know? So like, I think for me, like in writing the poetry, I was like, yeah, like thinking of the energies of astrological people in my life. And like, how do I like write odes, almost like poetic odes to like Black Virgo-ness in my life, you know, write poetic odes to Black Scorpio-ness in my life, you know? So I think for me, it did feel like, you know, divining in a way. And it was, I loved it.
Yo, and the divining comes through in your book, like the stars and the blackness between them. I gotta say, like everybody watching, if you want a master work in how to create new language, read Junauda's book, because I feel like what you did with the language there just opened me up to that ancestral divining. Like it is, your poems also grasp at that thing that we can't reach, that thing that like is in the stars, that thing that we pray to on our altars. The language in your book is like a pathway to that. And it is unlike anything else I've ever read. Like it is an oracle. Is an oracle. And like that's the energy that I think that is coming into, you know, 2020, even with all of this wildness, is like people are starting to wake up to the oracles around them and listening to that ancestral knowledge and that love, you know?
Ashe.
I feel like that's a perfect segue. We're gonna just go into the conversation about like, what is racial justice reads? Why are we doing this? What is the concept behind it? You know, Race Forward started Racial Justice Reads in 2018, right before our conference that we do every 2 years. Really, the idea behind it is that there are so many ways in which writers are using all of these different genres, right, to talk about their experiences, writers of color to talk about their experiences, and also to create space. You know, one of the things about the conference that I love so much is just the like wild beauty of all of the people who come together in that space, you know. And I think working in racial justice for as many years as I have, I wanted to really be able to put together a space that represents like all of the different people who are fighting for racial justice and also teaching about race and racial justice in ways that aren't just in the classroom, right? That aren't just in the ivory towers or in academia or in sociology books. Like, I love the new Jim Crow, and I love what a book like Michelle Alexander's has done. And also there's some folks who don't rock with that, right? That there's some folks who are out here reading comic books. There's some folks who are out here reading memoirs. There's some folks who are out here, you know, reading comedy books. And those books are also changing the landscape and advancing racial justice in a way that's really important. And I'm such a book nerd, and I'm a racial justice nerd. And I just believe that there's a lot of us who are both. And Racial Justice Reads is a space to really advance these conversations, to come together, to widen our circle, to invite folks to be part of racial justice struggles a little bit outside of the genres that they normally participate in, that they normally read, or that they're, you know, kind of like most attracted to, right? To just open that up and say, you know what? You would actually learn a lot from reading this young adult novel about these two Black girls who are able to like find each other and learn about abolition while falling in love, right? And that's a whole project right there. And that's, you know, the stars and the blackness between them, Junauda's book that, you know, I just love so much. And I just feel like that, like for Gabby, I'm so thankful, because I feel like you create in Juliet a character where like a young me could have seen themselves, you know, and that's so powerful, because I didn't grow up having access to that. And so I just wanted to lift that up and share that and appreciate the just beautiful love that you've put into your work, and the ways in which that love is also fighting, right? And I just wanted to lift up, for those of you who are joining us now, that Junauda is in Minneapolis-based author. And, you know, and we're sending so much love to now every state, right, in this country and across the globe. There's so much uprising. There's so much energy and folks fighting in so many different ways. We want to give folks a heads up that at 45 after the hour, we're going to be joining the NAACP's call for 8 minutes and 46 seconds of silence, right, to uplift George Floyd's spirit and memory, and commit ourselves in body and soul to justice for him and justice for all of our Black siblings throughout the world. So I wanted to segue into our interview questions, but also if y'all want to do a little bit of reading, if y'all had chosen excerpts from your books to share, I wanted to invite us to start with that, and then we'll get into questions.
My neighbor. Hey. Hi.
Yeah, Junauda, that's on whatever you want to do first. You have the floor, Mama.
Well, I wanted to, it's funny because I was going to write you. I'm like, what part of your book are you going to read? Well, you know what? I'm going to read the prologue. I don't know why I had to put this granola in my mouth right before this conversation. I'm so typical. Yeah. But I'm going to read the prologue. And one thing I will say is that, yeah, like I think I'm grateful that I wrote a book that's very Minneapolis and based in Minneapolis, because I think whatever Minneapolis is after this is going to be very different, you know? And I think that's okay. You know, it needed to be different. And I also am grateful that there's a book about Black queer girls in Minneapolis in a way that I think, I don't know what other ways people will think about Minneapolis, but I'm glad this is one of the narratives about Minneapolis in the world. And I'm going to read this prologue, which feels connected to the moment. We outsmarted oblivion 7 times in a row and made it look like jazz with no chains, like shaking our butt with no shame. We moonwalked past the ghosts of this living world. We decided to free ourselves out of the estranged strangling of this reality. We swan dived and centered in our magic. We found an eternal life that couldn't understand prisons or any other enslavement. We was not at the frequency that could catch or contort our souls. It wasn't easy, but destiny is destiny. Our bodies levitated by the stardust of the ancestors in our bones. Our ecstasy got divined and limitless existence. This is how we figured it out. Heard on an echo of a breeze in a playground somewhere in the future where kids is feeling free and they double dutch in singing, gardening, and twerking in the radiance of their ancestors' laughter. Oh, and this is like, it's interesting because I was thinking about George Floyd, and I'm just like, you know, I'm so like, I'm so connected to the ancestors. I love the ancestors so much. And like, I've really, you know, feel him because he's like, you know, where it happened was so close and like so many people have come, like the space has so much energy, you know? And I'm just like, yo, some ancestors, like, I feel like there's all these ancestors that was like, we ready, you know? Particularly those who died from white supremacy and, you know, police violence of a police state. So yeah, I don't know. I feel like, do you want to like double dutch, Gabby? Like I read a piece, you read a piece, I read a piece, you read a piece. That would be cute.
Do that if you want.
Or I mean, are you not ready? I don't. Well, you know, I don't want to put you on the spot neither.
No, I'm ready. I'm also just like, look. Some Alexis S just wrote, "Woo!" Junauda, when you read that, it's just like I feel it in my heart. You know what I mean? And I feel it in the energy. And what you're saying is so true too, right? Like if we think about land and we think about spirits and we think about all the pain that has happened in this country, right? Then as we move, we are surrounded by all of that, right? They have not left. Our ancestors are still here demanding that we like reclaim what was ours, right? And for those of us who were brought here, our ancestors are like, the people that were here need their stuff and we need our stuff too, you know? So it is a reckoning.
Totally.
You know, I'm gonna read this little part about Juliet Takes a Breath. You know, one of the things with my book that I've made peace with is that it does censor whiteness in a way, right? It does censor, or it highlights, like Harlow, she's a white lady feminist. And Juliet, one of the biggest things she's grappling with is how to keep herself from being harmed and to understand what is white feminism, you know? And so, but in the middle of that, there is also Juliet trying to discover who she is as like a queer Puerto Rican. And a lot of the folks that read my book that aren't of color will automatically grasp onto the whiteness and always make that identity part. And so I want to read this one piece where Juliet is learning about the Puerto Rican nationalist Lolita. Okay. I sat in a cubicle, fully immersed, swallowing images of a strong Puerto Rican woman and her fight for liberation, all told through the eyes of her granddaughter. I felt like a granddaughter too, seated at the foot of a rocking chair, taking in a story of the life of someone else's abuela. And the weight of Lolita LeBron's legacy rested heavy, tumor-like, on the life of her granddaughter. In fact, right from the beginning of this book, her granddaughter admitted that she tried to kill herself and was in a mental institution. Damn, if my grandma tried to overthrow the government and then landed in prison forever, I guess I'd have some really deep shit to work out too. That type of pain has got to get passed on, right? But I took pride in Lolita LeBron's bold moves. Nobody stopped her from walking into the U.S. House of Representatives and busting shots in the name of a free Puerto Rico. It was 1954, and the U.S. government was treating PR like its own private island, gouging it for sugar, using its shores for military purposes, and passing laws that made it illegal to display Puerto Rican flags or fight for Puerto Rico's independence for the United States. Apparently, the US didn't ask the people of Puerto Rico if they wanted to be a protectorate. They just swooped on in, and Lolita wasn't having any of it. She fired the first shot. She shouted, "Viva Puerto Rico libre." Wait a second. My United States did this to Puerto Rico? The country I pledged allegiance to all through school? This country where they told you you could just pull yourself up out of poverty and make something of yourself? This is the country that decimated my island? How could I not know this? How could I walk around my block with a Boricua bandana wrapped around my head, marching down Fifth Avenue next to the Goya float in the Puerto Rican Day Parade, and not have one clue that people were prisoned and killed because they rallied against the US occupation of Puerto Rico? How did I know about Walter Mercado and Jennifer Lopez but know nothing of Lolita Lebron?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe America just swallowed all of us, including all of our histories, and spat out whatever it wanted us to remember about ourselves in the form of something easy, flashy, and cinematic. And the rest of us born here without that firsthand knowledge of the civil unrest over there, we just inhaled what this country gave us. And it left me asking myself, what kind of Puerto Ricans did my parents want me to be?
Mm.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh, I feel like in that you have just captured so much of the complexity of, like, we can't teach that, you know, in a one-day training. Mm-hmm. We can't, like, that, what you've done through Juliet's voice is really expand the vision of what liberation looks like, right? And mm-hmm. also recognizing this like deep and subtle racism, right? Mm-hmm. That she's subject to, of just being disconnected from her own history, right? And that's such a deep impact on our communities. That's so much of the root of what we were talking about earlier before we started the recording, why our families are divided in this moment, right? And why people are trying to figure out where they fit in this struggle is because we're disconnected from that kind of history. So thank you for that sharing. And I'm so excited. I'm just like, I feel like all of the thoughts are jammed in the door trying to get out at the same time to be like, let's go here, let's go here, let's go here. And I just wanted to kind of circle back and ask if y'all would like to talk a little bit about that first question we talked about in terms of like, who are you and who are your people? Where do you come from? And share that with the folks who are here with us.
Well, I could start. So I always say that I'm certainly feel I'm Black of Caribbean descent. I feel like Black is who I am, and of African descent, and of Caribbean ancestry. Both my parents. My father is from the Virgin Islands, St. Croix. So in a similar political situation as Puerto Rico, as I got a lot of uncles who are Puerto Rican. I know we all Caribbean up in here. And then my mama is a Trinidadian and very much a Trini. But I was born and raised in Minneapolis, which is like, it's a very diverse city in a lot of ways, but there wasn't a ton of West Indians, or Caribbean people versus, if you go to like New York, where it's like every other, person of color, Black person is for sure Caribbean. You know what I mean? Damn near. So, yeah, but I feel like, I was born on Dakota land, like this part of the country very strongly has the indigenous community, representing and healing and living their life ways, as well as like so many people from around the world. And, a lot of white settler culture. I feel like I certainly come from like queer, wild, sort of imagination. I feel like that's my lineage, as well as like Black diaspora futurism and a lot of whimsicalness. Um, so yeah, I feel like, do you want to double dutch with me, Gabby? Do you want to like jump in there? Like,
I'm just here. I'm like, yes, talk about it.
yeah.
I am Puerto Rican from the Bronx. That's really like, a lot of people be like, that's not an identity maybe, but like to me, that's so central to be like Puerto Rican from the Bronx. That's such a central type of experiencing your
Totally.
Puerto Rican identity, your experience of like the intersections of like race, class, and poverty, and like inner city living and all that stuff. So, but my parents were both born in the Bronx, in the South Bronx, Hunts Point area, and we lived in the North Bronx in the Wakefield area. Yeah, I'm light-skinned Puerto Rican, and yes, okay, Tiff, we see you in the comments. My parents, I also like to say that like we were like Bronx, but like also like middle class for the neighborhood too, because both my parents stayed married, and like my mom was a teacher and my dad was a salesman, and so they had like relatively good incomes, and I lived in a house that my parents owned in a neighborhood where the Black family next door, the Muslim family next door, the Indian family, all were homeowners too. So it was one of those neighborhoods where like everybody's like POC, and we had some Italians, but it's like hard-working family neighborhood. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's where I'm always gonna be, from the Bronx. I live in Oakland now, but yeah, and I'm trying to reconnect to like my Puerto Rican Boricua identity. Like that came with my family, with my grandparents. But since my grandparents have passed, right, it's been on me to kind of like find those roots again and really dig deep into what it means to be from the Caribbean diaspora and to like live here. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I'm here as hell, and I claim dykes all across the world.
Dykes across the world.
all Caribbean and all queer. That's beautiful.
Big, like color Black dykes. Like, just let us remember that every point in history, butch ass dykes, leather dykes, femme dykes have been holding it down on the ground, holding it down in the homes, holding it down for all our
in the streets.
Yeah, all of us.
Absolutely. I know, especially like in queer whatever Pride Month or whatever the frick the whites wanted to decide to make it a month. We was trying to go for this lifetime, so y'all ain't trying to make us a month. But like, right now, like, how just that energy of resistance that actually pushes towards a new phase of existence. Like, to me, I totally am thinking of our ancestors and how bold and like brave and like don't give a fuck, and we being slaying and cute and luscious with each other in it. I'm absolutely channeling and grateful for them because they riding with us, for sure, all over.
Listen, I want to be braver. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are moments, like, I've protested with Mike Brown. I've protested in New York, but recently, these protests in this pandemic really had me pushed up, like, against like a mental health wall and like a fear.
Speak it.
Was struggling with like this guiltiness of like, how do I show up when for the first time I feel fucking scared? Like, I feel the strength of this military. I feel the strength of this pandemic, like, and I'm here trying to be like, I want to show up every single time, guns blazing, and like fists up. And this particular protest, I've had to be like, okay, well, if you're having a panic attack getting out the door, how can you shift that energy and show up in a way that like will not put you in that state, right? You know, it's like what is my writing? What can I do with my writing? What can I do with my communities? What am I already doing? You know, those are, and I want to name that too, because it's like, we all imagine our ancestors being these strong, brave people, and they were, and they're on the front lines. And sometimes it can be intimidating and scary to be like, oh, fuck, I'm not showing up this time. But like, you are, you know, you just got to find that right lane, that open space, you know?
And I just feel like this is the moment to expand the dimensions that we're thinking of, like even just who are our ancestors, right? In these moments where I'm also like, I'm struggling with my unwell ancestors, right? I'm struggling with that lineage. I'm trying to heal ancestral curses that are coming up in these conflicts between me and my siblings, you know, in these conflicts between me and people who look like me. And at the same time, we have always been taught that our ancestors are more than our bloodline, right? Like we have our ancestors of the stone, we have our movement ancestors, right? And we have literary ancestors too. I feel like y'all definitely are in a literary lineage, and that matters, right? Like Audre Lorde is our collective literary ancestor, right? Our Caribbean auntie, you know, our dyke auntie, you know, our survivor, our fighter. And it's her words, right, that fuel us in so many different moments. And I feel like your words are in that lineage, right? Your words are part of that. And so I want to get into that because I feel like you've created these characters, right? In your book, you've conjured, you've expanded our universe with these characters. And I was wondering, you know, we were going to talk about like, you know, talk about your characters a little bit, but I'm also like, what would Juliet be doing right now? What would, you know, Audre, what would they be doing? What would your characters be doing? And how do you want to talk about them in this moment, right? Like this moment that's so full of just what feels like an endless galaxy of pain and grief and possibility, all swirled together, all braided together.
Can I say something real quick? It just came to my mind. I feel like we're very in Octavian times, like Octavia Butler. I don't think that's a word that's been used, but these are very Octavian times.
Junauda made it up. Quote her.
Well, and with respect and appreciation to our teacher, right? Tananarive, who's also going to be a guest in our next Racial Justice Read series. She's been doing these last month, she did these webinars about like Octavia tried to tell us, right? That this was going to happen. And so just also wanting to lift up her name and the ways in which she brought us together.
Totally.
Octavia.
But yeah, but oh my gosh, I love thinking of Juliet right now. Tell me what Juliet would be doing, yo. Smoking something.
You know, funny, I think that Juliet's cousin Ava would be like out in the streets, like rioting, putting her body on the line, being in front of the police, like using that like fiery Latina, but also like half white energy for the movement, right? And I think Juliet will also, of course, I think Juliet would be like already involved with Black community organizations and would just be kind of mobilizing in that, like those collectives, you know what I mean? Like Juliet is already doing like food drop-offs. Juliet is already like boosting like Black work in her writer circle. Like it's already part of the momentum. So I think Juliet is very much like just fitting in where the labor and where the support needs her, you know what I mean? And I think her mama would be with her in those queer LGBT like POC spaces, making comida, bringing plates of food, arroz con habichuela, you know, and feeding the people. That's how I see Juliet navigating all of this, you know what I mean? Like she's really close to my heart, and so yeah. Just everybody has a different lane to fit in, and I could see her doing that, and her boo Kira doing like radical librarian like actions, you know what I mean? Like yo, librarians are like,
yes, the librarians for the revolution. Look, that's gonna be so real. You know what? We haven't talked about America though.
Wait, but we gotta find out. We gotta ask what Mabel and Audrey will be doing right now.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what's their response, especially since they're already an ancestor?
Yeah, I mean, that's interesting. Well, that's the thing I think about. Like, y'all know, I'm not convinced that like Mabel doesn't come back in some other form or entity. Like, I kind of left it open.
Spoiler alerts, y'all.
Oh, well, it is, you know, y'all, yeah, you know, I feel you. My bad, people. I forget about that kind of stuff.
It's all good. It's all good. It's your show.
But yeah, I think for me, I really see these young Black youth in the street, like on some dignity shit. Like, they do not have none of these little fucking respectability feelings. They do not got no respectability feelings. They don't. They up in Target, getting their comforter, getting their Gatorade, and bouncing, and, you know, like, they showing up, you know what I mean? They're like, you know, they're late at night, you know, all kinds of things, you know. I feel like I've really been inspired by that. And I think so much of Audrey and Mabel were these kind of quirky, but politicized and defined in their Blackness and their politicization in a way that I feel like they totally would be like at the memorial, you know, bringing diapers, yeah, like making food, riding their bikes around, you know, like there's a lot of young people who are just like, right now, the like area around where George Floyd passed away is like this beautiful floral mandala. Like, I really feel like they should just cut off that part of the street, or this, you know, and just let that forever be like in the middle of the street, like Boulevard, because that's what the city has made it, you know. So I feel Mabel and Audrey would be there, just, you know, loving on each other, snuggling with their masks on, you know.
Yes.
So we haven't talked about your other work, Gabby, but I wanted to invite America Chavez into the conversation. What would America be doing?
Punching Nazis.
Punching Nazis.
Punching fucking Nazis.
Oh, we need America right up in these streets right now, because these white boys are out here.
Yeah, they really are. She'd be punching, she'd be stomping out, like chucking cop cars into the ether. And also America would just be following whatever it was that like Storm wanted her to do too, right? Because, you know, Storm is like, if America's out there, in my heart, I believe that she's following Storm's lead in the revolution. You know what I mean? Like,
I love that. Oh, that needs to be some shit right there. They need to come to Minneapolis.
Let's hit up Marvel and be like, what's good with
let's do it. Let's do it. Because I also think right now, like, it is a battle of consciousness. Oh, I love you all. Like, it is a battle of consciousness, really having people understand, like, yo, this society's roots, you know, that like this isn't a thing we need to be afraid, talking about the police state, a thing to be afraid to let go. It's a thing that like harms us, you know? So I think like having, you know, all kinds of beautiful, you know, ways of looking at it, such as, you know, this Black and Puerto Rican superheroes. Maybe there's some kissing.
Maybe
the romance
shows up too. She just like floats down on
Oh my God, let's pitch this, because, you know, love y'all. Y'all are the best. Mwah. Yeah, like, I think that would totally be hot. I think the world is totally ready for it. But yeah. Oh, sorry, but you were talking about America, and I just got so like aroused. Keep it going.
Well, look, there's just a little moment where we can change and we can all look at each other. We can all,
yeah,
it told me it could.
I'm here, I feel like I'm on this panel mostly to just like honor you, you know what I mean? Like, and I feel like when you're talking about like pleasure, right? That's part of it. Pleasure and arousal and like energy, that's also part of the revolution and part of the movement. You know what I mean? Like, they want us disconnected from our bodies. They want us in control of our bodies. You know what I mean? Like, and they, you know, for real, they don't fuck like we do. You know what I'm saying? They don't know how. They don't have it in them. They don't have the connection to the spirit. They don't have the connection to the body. So like, we can bring that kind of energy into this space, and we must, you know what I mean? Like, even writing Juliet, I was like, it's important for her, a love interest in this book, to not be a white girl. We've got Korean love interest, and I need them to be physically intimate. I want to see that. You know what I mean?
And the world wants to see that, especially like us, because I feel like that's the other thing. Like, I mean, that's the thing that was often talked about, or people mention in my book, it's a Black girl on a Black girl. And I think it's important to show like all the ways that us loving on our beautiful brown and Black bodies, you know what I mean? Like, really is a part of how we heal some of the ways that we've been taught, both personally not to love our bodies and not to see the beauty in other people who look like us, you know? So I do feel like, you know, or like have similar struggles or whatnot, you know? So, let's all make love.
I mean, this is one of the things about the ways in which books can do things that we can't always do in the streets or in the action or in the email or in the, you know, like, books actually give us the opportunity to have that interiority of like people of color, Black people loving each other. What it meant for me to watch Mabel and Audrey crush out on each other. I'd never seen that. You know, I'd never seen that in a book, like in that way, in that level of like, you know, the listening to the music and just like all the feelings and stuff. And so that advances, like that expands the possibility for those young queer, you know, like Black girls out there, you know, just the relationships, even the way that the parents show up, right? And the relationship with the parents. And I feel like that's the garden. Come on.
Like, God, could we have given my dad a garden? And maybe he wouldn't have been so like, you know, machismo and strict, you know? Maybe I wouldn't have been afraid of him if he had a place, you know? Like, I loved that. I love that. And I think that we are also offering models for how you can do stuff, right? Like, to be like, yes, young kid, you are allowed to be tender, and the best love that you can receive is a gentle love, is a intentional love, is an abundant love, you know, to use this language, right? Because their language offers us pain. Their language harms us. Their language tries to take our spirits from us, right? And it is up to us to use soft, healing, beautiful language to show our babies like, yo, yes, you are so magnificent that someone should be crushing on you right now. You deserve rose petals in your locker. You deserve.
You deserve rose petals
In the resource
garden.
Write
that shit down. Write that shit down. That's
in the resource garden. We're like, young cutie pot, like, put rose petals in their locker.
Seriously, when we uplift, like, Emmett Till, when we uplift all our kids that have been brutalized, when we uplift all our queer kids, you know, Tony McDay, everybody, like, part of me is like, they deserve to have had that message, and they didn't fucking get that message.
We deserved it, you know? Like, I think so much of like being a writer is like, oh, I wanted that, I needed that, I desired it. Like, I desired to see my desire outside of myself in books. Like, I read a ton of books, but I never got to see what it was like to also be pleasured. And I mean, that's the thing that I think was important in me writing, or in part of the book, of like having a masturbation scene, you know, because I think so much of how, you know, we are taught to understand our bodies is that somebody will teach us, or through being with someone else, that's the way we figure out sexual experiences, and not through just totally being curious and like present in our body and our body sensations. And I think especially as young people who, yeah, you know, I think it's easy in general in this culture to be disembodied, you know, but I do think like on a sensual and sexual level, like how do we affirm to young people all the time, like, yeah, like this is your spaceship, this little, you know, soft sweet thing, you know, is your thing, you know, like how do you continue to like honor it, and like honor it through feeling it and being with it and experiencing it, you know. So
look, there's a whole aspect of racism that we never talk about, that is the ways in which young queer people of color are robbed of our own sexuality, of our own concept of ourselves, of access to our bodies, of access to being able to see beauty and desirability, you know. And like just now people are starting to talk about the messed up race politics and like things like Tinder and Grindr and all these dating apps. But like when we talk about like what our young folks are dealing with, you know, all of the messages, because representation is so limited, all of the messages that they get about who's allowed to do what in a relationship, who's allowed to experience pleasure, what is sexy. If you want to remain within like your racial community, your racial identity, if you want to be seen in a certain way, you can only have sex in a certain way, you can only desire in a certain way, how limiting that is, and what a like intimate oppression, right? Yeah. Like and that we don't talk about.
And the way that we also like uplift and fetishize like sexual experiences with white folks. I'm like exhausted by that. I'm exhausted by the fetishization.
Yeah, I've noticed that.
Cases like that, if you're slim and white, all of a sudden, like you are the most sexiest person in the room. And I'm like, that is a myth. That's also a sickness. Like I do not traffic in like white attractiveness. Like I gotta let that go. You know what I mean? And it's like, if you are out there, right? Like for me, I never felt more in touch with my body and my experience as a sensual person and passionate person until I had like sexual intimate experiences with women of color, Black women, like specifically one woman who was like Black Puerto Rican and was just like this. I was like, this, there is a passion here. There is a magic. I am being affirmed in a way that like I never have been when I've had white partners, and like I am able to be my best self in this situation. Like it was life changing, y'all. I've never gone back. I've never gone back, y'all. It's like you know, and I say that also because in my upbringing with like my dad's white passing family, we were pushed towards white partners and pushed towards whiteness. And I had to literally at a certain point in my life be like, why am I being, no, they can't push me no more. Like I need to figure out who I am as a Puerto Rican, as a queer woman, like, and how I love. And that is going to happen through and with other queer women of color and queer people of color, non-binary femmes, transmasculine folks. Like we exalt each other's bodies. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And in this moment where people like at such a young age are being exposed to the violence, right, that's perpetrated against bodies of color, especially Black bodies in this country, the way that like missing and murdered Indigenous women, right? Like what in these communities, right? Like what's the message about your body and your access to yourself, that you can be exposed to the violence that you're going to be subject to because of your race so early, but you can't access a sense of the beauty and desirability and sexuality and power, right? That's in your body because you don't see it anywhere. It's not represented in any of the movies or books that you're exposed to. And just like, I love this so much. This is not like, I had no idea that we were going to go here. And I'm so glad that we have, you know, and I really want to rock with it and also just offer, you know, this little kind of directional tool in terms of another question if we want to go there, right? And thinking about these wishes for our communities? Like, what, if you had 3 wishes for your communities, what would they be? I know Gabby worked on this a little bit. If you want to take it first.
Go for it.
Oh yeah, I mean, 3 wishes for my communities, which for me is like queer Puerto Ricans from the Bronx, and also queer people of color, queer Black folks, right? Like I queer, indigenous, everybody, right? I want us all to have like gorgeous, beautiful, consensual, passionate intimacy with each other. So that's number 1, a wish. Number 2, healthcare for every damn body, right? Like just across the board, these are my wishes. And then number 3 is like a combo, like let's just really give Black folks reparations, right? Not just for the past, but also the present and the future. And I'm like, let's give Native tribes back the land, and let's figure out a new way to govern this country that like centers Black liberation and like Native, indigenous, like land magic, all that stuff. You know, I may not have all the right words, but those are my, that's what I want. I'm here happy for it. Like, I'm like, yes, please, let's do it.
That would be beautiful. I like those wishes. 3 wishes. Remind me of the question exactly.
3 wishes you have for your community. Communities, because I know you belong to, we all belong to a lot of communities, right? Maybe the first one's just like, what's your wish for Minneapolis right now, you know, for your communities at home?
Yeah. I mean, currently the wish is that for us to abolish the police. I've been working on, you know, abolishing the police for 20 years, you know, protesting police brutality. And this is the first moment. Something about this moment is really having people, because Philando Castile seemed so, you know, like was similarly like, oh my gosh, and this happened in the same region, but I don't know if it's because it happened in the same place. I don't even know. Like, I just feel like on an ancestral level, you know, there's this really clear opening of, you know, abolishing this racist, oppressive, militarized, and armed, you know, essentially white supremacy and capitalist motivated force from my community. Like, that would be wonderful to abolish the police state here and globally, because it's an issue globally. I think also alongside that is, like you said, Gabby, reparations. Like, I think reparations is a thing that certainly, you know, everybody would benefit from. You know, like, I think there's reparations to be given out for in a lot of ways. And I think some truth and reconciliation, that's some stuff that we're also talking about here. It's that I think it's not just like, oh, hey, let's just switch up the who has what. It's like, it's, you know, for sure that in some ways, but it's also like, let's talk about this shit. You know, like why have we been accepting this as a standard of interaction, you know, for, you know, between entities of people, like especially in Minneapolis, the police are so racist and whiteness. I mean, and that's what I was trying to say, not trying to say, but saying with Juliet is that we're always taught whiteness is the default, is what's right. It's what, like, even when it's killing everybody, we're taught to think white is right. And I think there are ways that it's important for us to like investigate and interrogate all of this shit. So I think for me, like, I would truly want, just like space to truly heal around white supremacy and, you know, have the work be done by white people to truly figure out how to resource the world from their fuckery, because they need to go for Bezos, man. Just go for the Bezos. And I also, you know, similar to what you're saying, I just think about sensual healing. Like, how do we like heal our relationship with our bodies and our desire, and how I think so much of living in a white supremacist capitalist society, it's the tool to like, you know, foreclose us access to that. So for me, it really is like, yeah, like I want that. And I also want a wish for the world just that we don't gotta work, you know, like, of course we gotta do some work.
Yeah.
But I feel like a lot of people out here working.
Abolish work.
Yeah. It's just like, you know, let's just, cause to me, it's like part of the fuckery. This is why the whole shit lit up in the world. Is that like, you know, everywhere they got people like here, you know, there's people who are having to like pick our food. You know, there's people who are having to like do the stupid jobs white people don't want to do. You know what I mean? Like the jobs that pay $8 an hour, the jobs that pay $12. So it's like, if I gotta go and serve, pay me $40 an hour. If I'm working at Jimmy John's, nigga, pay me $40 an hour. Like, let's really spread this shit out so that, okay, cool, maybe I only gotta work at Jimmy John's, you know, 10 hours a week, you know, but then the rest of the time I can do what I want to do. You know, so I think like so much of, you know, what the society like fundamentally, like, I don't want us to stop just at like interrogating the police state. I don't want us to just stop interrogating, I mean, and, you know, interrogating white supremacy, but like all of the ways that we've built society in this ableist, white, privileged, cis, you know, privileged, hetero privileged norm, rather than like, how can we all be chilling? This is our one little funky ass life that we know of for sure. Apparently, I know we got several lives. I believe it. But like in this lifetime, I'm not letting white people be like, yeah, y'all gonna catch that next lifetime. That next lifetime gonna be hot. But this lifetime, you're gonna scrub my toilets. Yeah. You know, this lifetime, you know what I mean? Like this imagination wants like people like Toni Morrison to be, you know, in their kitchen cooking. This imagination wants like, you know, all of these like tremendous, brilliant BIPOC folks to be like working at Mickey D's and all of this shit. Like, you know, whatever, not saying that there's anything low about those types of work, because I've done all that kind of work, but I also feel like that kind of work is so like financially draining and soul draining that you're not anything else but that. Whereas like we've all been in spaces where, you know, people with money, people with whiteness get to be like, yeah, I'm living my best life. Shit, man, give me that money, mama. I'm about to go over here and like break this shit. Da, 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 ah, you know? So.
We got some questions from our friends who have joined us here. And I just wanted to do a time check. We've got about 8 minutes before we start our 8 minutes of silence. So I really want to prioritize how y'all spend these next 8 minutes, because we also want to give shout outs, right? And we also want to just make sure that folks get your suggested action steps, right? Like what are the things that everybody on here can do, and everybody who watches this later, what can you do to be part of this racial justice movement? So what y'all think?
Oh yeah, we'll keep it 8 minutes. We'll move along. You ask those questions. We're here for it, right?
Okay. Well, the first one I feel like is like my life's work, right? Which is, you know, this question about anti-Blackness in communities of color and how we talk about that, right? And I'm just going to start by sharing that this is facilitator's privilege here. I'm obsessed with this question. I wrote a whole series about Latinx racial identity in December that's in color lines. I'll put it in the resource garden, which all of you will get after this. But I just want to say, like, yes, this is its own series, like ending anti-Blackness in communities of color. So I just want to pass the mic to y'all.
I feel like you've been talking a lot about that, Gabby, and, you know, interesting ways, because I think, I mean, I could certainly speak about anti-Blackness within, you know, all communities and within Black communities subconsciously or whatever, but like, I feel like you've been saying some really powerful things about it, reflections.
It is, and it just, I think, there's been a lot of like I was saying earlier, there's been a lot of like painful conversations that we're having in my family right now about this, especially given the fact that like most of the kind of abusive language against Black people and pro-police language comes from like the whiter side of my dad's family, the pro-Trump side, right? And so, but for me, this anti-Blackness in my family, like I had to unlearn that first. You know what I mean? Like let's be honest, like I'm a Puerto Rican from the Bronx. I grew up thinking that it was okay to say the N-word with your friends, you know what I mean? Like, and to rap along and do that, because we're all living in, like, quote unquote, the block together. We're all on the same block, and like the police are looking at Puerto Ricans the same way. I mean, light-skinned Puerto Ricans the same way they're looking at like Black Americans. And when you have that same experience, you think, oh, I'm allowed, that this is also mine, right? And I had to kind of just do that unlearning in myself, you know, like starting even in the most kind of maybe cliche way, but starting with reading the Autobiography of Malcolm X. That changed my whole life. Started with reading Sister Outsider. Started with reading and listening and just being quiet, right? And trying to figure it out. And through my personal excavations, my family being like, oh, what are you reading? What are you doing? You know, like learning with me. And then also other sides of my family picking up and being like, oh, well, I'm not racist. I don't know why you have to read that. Or like, oh, well, I don't have to read that to know that like Black people commit more crimes, you know, like, so if you're looking to undo anti-Blackness in your family, it number one starts with you. And it number one also is like, you have to be both kind of like the tough guy and the soft person, right? So with some family members, you're going to be like, oh, we can talk about this. And you continue those conversations. And with other family members, you jump in and you got to be the bully, especially if they're attacking somebody else. You have to be the one that's like, no, you're wrong. You're wrong. And it hurts and it's painful. But it literally starts with you. It starts with each one of us to undo this, to unlearn these biases and these violences. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think like, you know, anti-Blackness is a thing. Like I think it's also interesting to be in a time, and I'm going to keep track of time. So like maybe a minute and a half beforehand, you give me the cue. But I think that there's a lot of ways that, you know, everything about Blackness and Africanness was like demonized and villainized to justify slavery. Like that was its like short-term mission, you know, but it's had such a long-term embedment in all of our societies and in all of our senses of selves. So I feel like I was, you know, really fortunate to grow up with a mom who's very dark-skinned, always had her hair shaved, and had a very strong sense of self. But I also grew up in Minneapolis, where a lot of the, you know, sort of norms of beauty were white norms. And there's also, you know, a lot of people who are mixed here, a lot of whiteness, you know, here in ways that did force me to struggle with seeing my beauty as a young person. So I think like so much of this moment that's exciting now is that young people get to see so many representations of Blackness being empowered, Africa in its truth. You know, we have social media where there's so many different kinds of authentic iterations and understandings of who we are. So I do feel like, you know, I do have to navigate anti-Blackness even with my daughter. You know, our society is so anti-Black. So I love kind of the specificity of anti-Blackness versus racism, because I do think it speaks to something a lot more idiosyncratic that is actually maybe could be rooted out in a way that's different than kind of like the ambiguous racism of it all, you know?
You know, like I like personally love The Rock, and he posted in, you know, support of Black Lives Matter, but the final slide on his Instagram says normalize equality. And I was like, what is that? Like, I get it, but that feels like such a like brainstorm think tank. Like, how do we not say Black anything, but also promote, like, it's like normalized togetherness? Like, what?
He got his own issues with whiteness, The Rock.
Yeah, no, listen,
and Republicanness.
You're right.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah, to name it as anti-Blackness is like the root. It's the root. It is the unfortunate root, especially. It feels like, especially here. I know it's like a global thing, but
yeah, and it's a perfect place for us to kind of like prime ourselves and prepare for this. What we're about to do is a spiritual exercise, right? We're looking at going 8 minutes and 46 seconds into just silence, right? And and joining all across the country and this globe with other people who are responding to this call from the NAACP to be in silence and join our spirits to George Floyd's, and to commit our spiritual energy to Black life. Coming back. Ibaye, George Floyd. Ibaye.
Rest in power. I know I was really like, wow. 8 minutes was feeling like, oh, this is feeling kind of long. And I was like, golly, like I remember like, yo, like I couldn't imagine being in that position for this whole time. Just like crying. And yeah, thank you for introducing or offering that, Osana. It's, you know, like I think this moment is very ancestral and futuristic. Like time feels collapsed between like lynching in the past and what's possible for our Octavian times, post-Octavian times, who knows, you know.
Yeah.
Love all of y'all out there.
I definitely want to appreciate the connection. Last night, I was talking with, you know, today is the movement for Black Lives has asked us to build altars today. And, you know, we've been talking about building an altar here in New Orleans in a public place that people can access. And one of the challenges of, you know, my spiritual community here locally is just like, since we've been separated through physical distancing, we're just having a hard time connecting because everybody's just connecting through these video conferences. And it feels really easy to like just not feel it, you know, to fall out of it. And something about taking that time to feel connected to y'all, to feel connected to the people who are watching, to feel connected to everyone in this moment. I feel like that's also what y'all, you know, it's a portal, right? And that portal is not unlike the way that y'all, you know, y'all create portals with your words, right? And connecting people through the experiences. And I'm feeling really moved and emotional and also like filled with gratitude and rage and grief and connection, a lot of connection. So
Same here. It's like the weirdest, like a funeral, you know, where you're like, oh my gosh, this loss. But then there's all this togetherness. You know, I think that's like the ancestral energies power is how like in the wake of our loss and in the depths of our grief that we often are pulled closer together. And, you know, I truly feel like this is deeply a moment honoring George Floyd and all of the lynched bodies of white supremacy throughout time, forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, you know, just yeah, so yay, everybody. Yes.
There's a few more questions that I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in the resource garden and y'all can answer them whenever you feel moved to answer them. And what I really want is to just make sure that people leave today in these next 3 minutes with your shout outs for what book, movie, short video should folks be like getting into, and what one or two racial action steps do you want them to take, or moves forward, you know, do you want folks to roll into?
Yeah, so these are some great questions too. We could just like jump in and out of them too.
Yeah.
Because there's one about how do we heal in BIPOC, especially queer trans communities, when we don't have any around where we live. Which I think is like, shout out to all of our like BIPOC queers who are in spaces that, you know, don't reflect them, which, you know, I'm not in as big a city as New York City, but like, there is that here. But yeah, like, I think, virtual spaces are quite tremendous, like, I think there's some ways that it's overwhelming and there's some ways where it's certainly not the same thing. Um, but I do feel like, and I do wonder about in smaller places, or, depending if it's not a smaller place, but just a certain kind of city. Um, I feel like there are spots. There's always a way people are connecting,
Yeah.
I just feel like that's always a thing that like inspires me. But
especially now, there's so many online possibilities for folks. But I do want to recognize we got about 2 minutes left of the official time.
Oh, my bad.
I belong to y'all. I'm down for, the whatever y'all want to do, but I also want to respect people's time. We did start a little late, so we can hang for an extra few minutes if y'all could hang for an extra few minutes.
I certainly can. Yes, we can close out with a, more full, juicy vibe. But I do feel like, just ground back and like almost this idea of like, what is the dream that we're kind of creating in our works for like a different reality than when we experience, and I guess, that also leans into this resource garden and the ways that people could support the work. Yeah. But I also like this question about what advice would you give a young person who wants to become a writer? I think just write a hell of a lot of writing. Like, even if you don't think it's good, just write a lot and read a lot and think about how you like what things sound like. Like, trust your voice. That I think that's really important.
Oh yeah, I 100% agree. How do you be a writer? Young writers, just write the things, write it in your language, write the jokes that make you laugh. Don't even worry about people think of audience. Let's get rid of that word and let's call it family, yo. Like, who are your family? Who's your friends? Who's your chosen?
Listen to your butch tia.
Like, wherever there's a you, we are all special, but wherever there's a you, there's another you. So like, just speak your needs and write your stories, and it doesn't have to follow any traditional format. You can create a whole new genre, like, and read, like Junauda said, read everything. Read everything that makes you excited and do it. And and one little tiny tip, if you do need some help, always ask for like a template, always ask for like an example. Like, if you want to write, you can literally, I'm gonna tell you, pick a chapter in my book and rewrite it. Just stick your experiences in it, just to practice. You know what I mean? Like, just as a practice, get it out. And then you have that under your belt and you keep moving and you keep writing.
So much. Yeah. There's like, I feel like I'm glad we live in a space where there's more multicultural writers, because it's also giving permission to have a lot of kind of people who write a lot of different kinds of things. It's not just kind of like this, singular idea. So yeah, totally. You could write memes for life. Shoot. I mean, I feel like memes be as like prolific as some of my deeply thought out. There's so many ways to communicate. So
yeah. Well, let's close out with these action steps. I want to use a different with these actions that folks can take to advance racial justice. What do you recommend for folks? And if you want to share, we'll put the book, movie, or video or whatever it is in the garden.
I think for me, Sadia Hartman, who wrote Beautiful Experiments, Wayward Lives, Beautiful Experiments, which I think is just a good book for any artist, any Black artist, any woman artist to read. I think, like right now, I've truly been, focused on my own city currently with like what's happening, particularly with, supporting resources. But I also feel like right now there's things happening all over around like abolishing the police. But I do know that, I don't know if the website is up yet. I might have to put it in the garden, but there is a website up like showing all the different ways you can support Minneapolis, particularly North Minneapolis and St. Paul. These are both communities that, yeah, you know, what else? I encourage you to read. I don't know. I really do feel like this is a time for people to just educate themselves about, like, you know, all of the great, you know, queer writers, Black writers, POC writers. Like, let's just like decolonize our brain, you know, abolish the shit from our brain.
Absolutely.
I don't know.
Yeah, I listen. My one action tip is to begin the process of divesting from whiteness. Shut it off. Don't reblog it. Don't boost. Don't have like white folks on your cooking shows. Like, I'm tired of white people as like experts. Like, if you want to do work as a white person, you can facilitate, you can support, you can do the running around, the busy work. That's what I try to do. You know what I mean? But like, stop it. At one point in my like early 20 dykeness, I was like, oh, I'm not gonna reblog pictures of Kristen Stewart anymore because she don't look like nobody in my neighborhood, and I wanna stop lusting after like sallow, skinny looking white girls. And I'm gonna start today, you know, and just that little bit, right? And when you're picking a movie, are there Black leads? Are there Latinos? Are there Native folks in this? Are there queer people? Like, pick and choose. And every time it's like straight up just white people, just be like, no, if you want to watch Friends, watch Living Single instead. You know what I'm saying? Like, there's always an alternative, and we've seen it. Listen, when they did The Wiz live on Channel 4 and it was all Black commercials, I was like, oh, y'all can actually do this.
Yep.
And you
see how that works.
Soak us in whiteness instead. You have the commercials and you have the money and you do know how to flip it to make TV look like our neighborhoods, and you don't. And so I think personally the first number one choice is to be like, I divest from this.
Yeah. Yeah. Whew, I could keep going. I have to plug our next amazing panel that I want to invite y'all to you know, boost and share. Tananarive do. Malka Older, who wrote Infomocracy, and JY Neon Yang. Okay,
this
so
Daniel Jose Older too, by the way.
Yes. So DJ sister, Malka. Malka's gonna be on the next one. And just really wanna share that you know, Race Forward has a lot of resources. Right now, people are looking for resources, and those will be in the garden for you. And we're just so excited to keep doing this. So just want to send so much love to all the attendees, and just love to y'all. Look, I'm just gonna give like big cow eyes to both of y'all. Beautiful.
Same here. I like that.
Superheroes.
Jackson, big shout out to Key Jackson.
Yes, Key, sibling, come through. Come on.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah, no, this was great. Thank y'all. I feel so much love. And yes, continue to do these great things, and I can't wait to check them out.
Oh, and Tiff Joy, thank you so much for supporting all the folks behind the scenes. Thank y'all so much. Like, come on, come off camera. Well, let's just like make cow eyes at you too. Beautiful, if you can.
Hey,
thanks so much. Appreciate it.